Imagine leading a nation out of slavery, only to face a journey through a treacherous desert. In the midst of this, Moses receives a divine encounter that changes everything. Join us as we uncover the epic story of the Ten Commandments, how Moses found these sacred laws on Mount Sinai after the dramatic escape from Egypt. In the land of Egypt, where the sun blazed and the Nile flowed, a people known as the Israelites lived in bondage. They toiled under the harsh rule of Pharaoh, their cries for deliverance rising like incense to the heavens. Among them was a man named Moses, chosen by God to lead his people to freedom. One night the air was thick with tension and anticipation. The Israelites gathered in their homes, marking their doorposts with lamb's blood as instructed by Moses. It was the Passover, the night when the angel of death would pass over their homes, sparing their firstborns. As the cries of the Egyptians filled the air, signaling the death of their firstborns, Pharaoh finally relented. He summoned Moses and Aaron in the dead of night and commanded them to leave Egypt with their people. The Israelites, laden with gold and silver given by the Egyptians in their haste, set out towards the Red Sea. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that God led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, "Lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt." Exodus 13:17. God guided them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Yet, as they camped by the Red Sea, they saw Pharaoh's army approaching. Fear gripped their hearts, and they cried out to Moses, "Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness?" they lamented. But Moses, full of faith, reassured them, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." With Pharaoh's army closing in, God commanded Moses to stretch out his hand over the sea. As he did, a mighty east wind blew, parting the waters and creating a dry path. The Israelites crossed safely, but as the Egyptians pursued, the waters returned, engulfing them. The Israelites stood in awe on the other side, witnessing the power of their God. They sang a song of deliverance, praising God for his mighty acts and faithfulness. The journey through the wilderness was arduous. The sun was relentless and water was scarce. The Israelites began to murmur against Moses, questioning their deliverance. But God, ever faithful, provided for their needs. He sweetened the bitter waters of Marah and rained down manna from heaven, a bread-like substance that sustained them daily. Each morning they would gather the manna, and it tasted like wafers made with honey. Then said the Lord unto Moses, "Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day, that I may prove them, whether they will walk in my law or no." Exodus 16:4. Despite these miracles, the people continued to grumble. They longed for the meat and vegetables of Egypt, forgetting the bondage they had endured. In response, God sent quail in abundance, satisfying their cravings, but reminding them of the importance of obedience and trust. After 3 months, the Israelites arrived at the desert of Sinai and camped at the foot of the mountain. It was here that God intended to establish a covenant with his people, to give them laws that would set them apart as his chosen nation. Moses ascended Mount Sinai, where God spoke to him, saying, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the people of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." Moses relayed God's message to the people, and they agreed to obey. For 3 days they prepared themselves, consecrating their bodies and souls, for on the third day God would descend upon the mountain. The morning of the third day was marked by thunder and lightning, and a thick cloud covered the mountain. The sound of a trumpet grew louder, and Mount Sinai was wrapped in smoke as the Lord descended in fire. The whole mountain trembled violently, and Moses spoke, and God answered him in thunder. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mount, and the Lord called Moses up to the top of the mount, and Moses went up. God instructed Moses to set bounds around the mountain and warn the people not to approach. Then, amidst the awe-inspiring display of his power, God spoke the 10 Commandments, his covenant with his people. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me, and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor, and do all thy work. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. As the voice of God thundered from the mountain, the people trembled in fear. They stood afar off and said to Moses, Speak thou with us, and we will hear. But let not God speak with us, lest we die. Moses reassured them, saying, Fear not, for God is come to prove you, and that his fear may be before your faces, that ye sin not. Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was, and there he received further instructions regarding the laws and ordinances that would govern the people. God outlined the construction of an altar, the laws concerning servants, restitution, and social justice, emphasizing the importance of holiness and justice. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and rose up early in the morning, and builded an altar under the hill, and 12 pillars, according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Moses took the book of the covenant and read it to the people, who responded, All that the Lord hath said will we do, and be obedient. Moses then sprinkled the blood of the covenant on the people, sealing their agreement with God. He, along with Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, ascended the mountain. There they beheld the glory of God, and ate and drank in his presence. God called Moses higher up the mountain, where he would stay for 40 days and 40 nights. During this time, God gave Moses 2 tablets of stone, inscribed by his own finger, containing the 10 Commandments. And the Lord said unto Moses, Come up to me into the mount, and be there, and I will give thee tables of stone, and a law, and commandments which I have written, that thou mayest teach them. God provided detailed instructions for the construction of the tabernacle, a sanctuary where he would dwell among his people. He described the Ark of the Covenant, the table for the bread of the presence, the golden lampstand, and the altar of incense. Each item was to be crafted with precision and care, symbolizing the holiness and beauty of God's presence. The tabernacle would be a physical representation of God's covenant with Israel, a place where they could come to worship and offer sacrifices. It would serve as a reminder of God's continual presence and guidance. While Moses was on the mountain, the people grew restless. They approached Aaron and said, "Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him." Aaron, succumbing to their pressure, instructed them to bring their gold, which he then fashioned into a golden calf. The people declared, "These be thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt." They celebrated with feasting and revelry, turning away from the true God who had delivered them. On the mountain, God saw their actions and told Moses to return to the camp, for the people had corrupted themselves. Moses descended with the tablets in hand. When he saw the golden calf and the people dancing, his anger burned. He threw the tablets to the ground, breaking them, symbolizing the broken covenant. He then took the calf, burned it in the fire, ground it to powder, and scattered it on the water, making the Israelites drink it. Moses confronted Aaron, who weakly justified his actions. Moses called for those who were on the Lord's side to come to him, and the sons of Levi rallied. They executed God's judgment on the idolaters, and about 3,000 men fell that day. Moses returned to God, pleading for forgiveness on behalf of the people. He acknowledged their great sin and asked God to blot him out of his book if he would not forgive them. And the Lord said unto Moses, "Whosoever hath sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book. Therefore now go, lead the people unto the place of which I have spoken unto thee. Behold, mine angel shall go before thee. Nevertheless, in the day when I will visit their sin upon them." God instructed Moses to carve 2 new tablets like the first, and ascend the mountain again. There God proclaimed his name and passed before Moses, declaring, the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and upon the children's children unto the 3rd and to the 4th generation. Moses bowed and worshipped, asking God to go with them, pardon their iniquity, and take them as his inheritance. God renewed the covenant, repeating the commandments and laws. Moses stayed on the mountain for another 40 days and nights without eating bread or drinking water, as he inscribed the words of the covenant on the new tablets. Upon returning, Moses' face shone with the radiance of God's glory, so much so that the people were afraid to come near him. He wore a veil to cover his face when speaking to them, but would remove it when speaking to God. The Israelites set to work constructing the tabernacle according to the detailed instructions God had given Moses. Skilled artisans, filled with the Spirit of God, crafted the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altars, and the garments for the priests. Each piece was made with devotion and reverence, symbolizing their commitment to God. When the tabernacle was completed, Moses inspected the work and blessed the people. God instructed him on the anointing and consecration of the tabernacle and its furnishings. Once everything was set in place, the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, signifying his presence among his people. Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation, because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. With the tabernacle established and the covenant renewed, the Israelites were prepared to continue their journey to the promised land. They followed the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, confident in God's presence and guidance. The 10 Commandments, inscribed on tablets of stone, were more than laws. They were a testament to God's covenant with his people. They served as a moral and spiritual foundation, guiding their relationship with God and with one another. The journey through the wilderness was long and challenging, but it was also a time of growth and learning. The Israelites learned to trust in God's provision and to live according to His commandments. They experienced His mercy and judgment, His faithfulness and holiness. Through their trials and triumphs, the Israelites were being shaped into a nation set apart for God. The Ten Commandments stood as a beacon, reminding them of who they were and who they were called to be. And so the story of the Ten Commandments is not just a tale of laws given on a mountain, but a story of a people chosen by God, delivered from bondage, and called to a life of holiness and obedience. It is a story of covenant and commitment, of faith and faithfulness, of God's unending love and mercy. As the Israelites journeyed, they often reflected on the commandments given to them. Each commandment held deep significance, shaping their identity and relationship with God. "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." This commandment emphasized the exclusive devotion to Yahweh, rejecting the polytheistic practices they had witnessed in Egypt. It called for a singular focus on the one true God, setting the foundation for their worship and allegiance. "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image." In a world filled with idols and carved representations of deities, this commandment was revolutionary. It underscored the importance of worshiping God in spirit and truth, free from the corruption of idolatry. "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." This commandment called for reverence and respect for God's name, acknowledging His holiness and the sacredness of their relationship with Him. It warned against using His name carelessly or in a way that would diminish His majesty. "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." The Sabbath was a gift, a day of rest and reflection. It reminded the Israelites of God's creation and His rest on the seventh day. It was a time to cease from labor and focus on spiritual renewal, strengthening their bond with God. "Honor thy father and thy mother." This commandment reinforced the importance of family and respect for parental authority. It promised longevity and well-being in the land God was giving them, highlighting the connection between honoring one's parents and societal stability. "Thou shalt not kill." Life was sacred, created by God, and this commandment affirmed the value of every human being. It called for respect and protection of life, condemning violence and murder. "Thou shalt not commit adultery." This commandment safeguarded the sanctity of marriage, emphasizing fidelity and trust within the marital relationship. It highlighted the importance of purity and faithfulness in personal and communal life. "Thou shalt not steal." Respecting others' property and rights was essential for a just society. This commandment promoted honesty and integrity, condemning theft and deceit. "Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor." Truthfulness and integrity in speech were crucial for maintaining trust and justice. This commandment warned against falsehood, slander, and perjury, upholding the value of truth. "Thou shalt not covet." This commandment addressed the desires of the heart, warning against envy and discontent. It called for contentment and gratitude, recognizing God's provision and blessings. As the Israelites continued their journey, the Ten Commandments remained central to their faith and practice. They were etched not only on tablets of stone, but also on the hearts of the people. They shaped their laws, their worship, and their daily lives. Generations later, these commandments would continue to be a cornerstone of moral and ethical conduct. They would influence not only the Jewish faith, but also Christianity and many other cultures and societies. The Ten Commandments were more than rules. They were a revelation of God's character and His desire for His people. They pointed to a life of holiness, justice, and love. They were a guide to living in harmony with God and with one another. Through their journey, the Israelites learned that obedience to God's commandments brought blessings, while disobedience brought consequences. They experienced God's mercy and forgiveness, His provision and protection. They discovered that he was a God of covenant faithfulness, who kept his promises and never abandoned his people.